Welcome to today's Explainer. We're unpacking a topic that has, well, absolutely dominated international travel news lately. We're taking a hard look at the realities of the Spanish tourism protests by breaking down the on-the-ground source material. You know, if you've seen the headlines, you might actually be thinking Spain is slamming its doors shut. But today we're going to cut right through that noise and get straight to the facts.
Okay, let's dive into this, because I know exactly what you're wondering. You've seen the dramatic news, the protests in the streets, and you're probably asking yourself, wait, am I still welcome in Spain? Is Mallorca literally telling me to cancel my trip? And hey, it's a completely understandable reaction, especially given how much algorithms absolutely love feeding us chaotic coverage. But the real story is so much more fascinating, and honestly, way less alarming than what your newsfeed is serving up.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by looking beyond the sensational headlines, then we'll be unpacking the Mallorca protests. After that, we'll get into the real problem, which is the model itself, followed by the dynamic of us locals versus them tourists. And finally, we'll wrap up with the new way to visit.
All right, Section 1, Beyond the Sensational Headlines. Let's demystify this massive media frenzy coming out of the UK right now.
Take this super dramatic tabloid claim screaming about a 3-year tourist ban. I mean, it sounds terrifying, right? But these exaggerated headlines are basically just designed to grab your attention. They create this illusion of harsh, sweeping restrictions that, well, simply do not exist. When you actually read the fine print of our source material, you quickly realize that political agendas, post-Brexit dynamics, and just a sheer flair for exaggeration have completely skewed public perception.
And this brilliantly illustrates the real story. Here's your reality check. There is no ban. No way. The new measures the Spanish government is implementing actually just target short-term rental regulations in specific areas, and they introduce a new tourist registration system for safety and management. That's literally it. Spain isn't closing its borders. It's just actively trying to balance necessary tourism growth with the everyday needs of its local communities.
Moving on to Section 2, Unpacking the Mallorca protests. Let's look at what really happened on the ground.
Let's move to and see how this builds chronologically across the summer of 2026. First, the media claims start swirling, kind of setting a tense stage. Then, on July 26th, Palma sees its largest demonstration to date, with attendance estimated somewhere between 25,000 and 70,000 people. Then, about 2 weeks later, on August 8th, a smaller town called Solar holds its own march with roughly 1,000 to 2,500 people. As you can see, this is a very organized, sequential movement. It's not some spontaneous riot.
But here is the absolutely critical context that's totally missing from those viral videos you might have seen. The demonstrations were overwhelmingly peaceful. Tens of thousands of people marched without a single incident. The images of violence were heavily inflated. They represent isolated clashes involving a tiny fraction of the crowd, constrained to one highly specific location at the very tail end of the Palma March. Everywhere else, daily life in restaurants and on the coasts continued completely unaffected.
To truly understand the protests, you really just have to look at the slogan being chanted, Menos turismo, más vida, which translates to less tourism, more life. I think this reveals the true target. The residents aren't marching because they hate individuals visiting their home. They're pushing back against an overstretched system. It's a plea for a better quality of life, not an attack on you, the traveler.
Which brings us to Section 3, the real problem, the model. It's really about scale, not individuals.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this massive number, 100 million. That is the staggering number of visitors Spain expects to welcome this year alone. Just pause for a second and think about the sheer absurdity and the logistical weight of 100 million people descending on a single country. It literally multiplies the local population of these islands several times over during those peak summer months. Alongside that, we have this number 12. Tourism accounts for roughly 12% of Spain's entire national GDP, and it's an even larger chunk locally in places like the Balearics. This highlights a really profound paradox. On one hand, the region has a deep economic reliance on the hospitality industry, but on the other, the sheer volume required to sustain that generates an incredibly heavy burden on the people who actually live there year-round.
So what does that burden actually look like? Well, it looks like severe structural strains. Our source material points out that unregulated short-term rentals are heavily pushing up housing costs, effectively pricing out local tenants. It looks like stretched healthcare and public services. It's daily traffic gridlock through small-town tunnels, like in Solar. And it's mounting environmental pressure on the ports from seasonal boat traffic.
You see, these are the real, everyday grievances of the residents living inside a high-volume tourism model.
So I want to reassure you with this brilliant quote straight from the source material. A protest against cruise ship volume, unregulated short-term rentals is not the same thing as a protest against you, specifically having a good meal in Palma. Conflating those two things is exactly what turns a valid policy argument into a sensational culture war headline. The anger is directed at the development model itself, not at you enjoying your vacation.
All right, Section 4. Us locals versus them tourists. Bridging the divide.
It's a complex dynamic. From the local perspective, residents really view themselves as custodians of their heritage. They want to protect their traditions while dealing with the harsh realities of overcrowding and rising rents. But then, from the tourist perspective, visitors arrive eager for genuine, authentic cultural experiences, and they know they're providing a vital economic contribution. The friction happens when there's a mutual misunderstanding. When tourists impose their expectations or overlook the local reality, or conversely, when locals stereotype all visitors as culturally insensitive.
So the crucial point is that bridging this gap requires us to move past those stereotypes. It requires embracing cultural exchange and mutual respect. When we foster sustainable practices, it doesn't just protect the environment, it ensures that the economic benefits of tourism are shared equitably, all while preserving the very cultural heritage that makes places like Mallorca so incredibly special to begin with.
And finally, Section 5. The new way to visit. How to be a welcome guest.
I absolutely love this concept outlined in our sources. They call it invisible luxury. It's defined as traveling in a way that enriches both the visitor and the place itself. Basically, presence without imposition. That's the real key here, presence without imposition. It's about engaging genuinely with a destination rather than just extracting an experience from it. Honestly, this is the ideal future state of travel.
So how do we actually achieve invisible luxury? Well, the sources give us 3 practical steps. Step 1. Favor smaller, legally licensed accommodations over those unregulated short-term rentals. Step 2. Spread your time and your spending way beyond the saturated, busy streets of Palma. Go explore the quieter corners. And Step 3. Simply respect the island as a lived home, not a stage set put up for your entertainment. I want to ask you directly, how can you incorporate these steps into your next itinerary?
And that brings us to our final thought for this explainer. The true charm of Spain is absolutely still there, waiting for you with warm hospitality. But as we move forward into a new era of global travel, we all have a choice to make. Will your next trip be an imposition on the local community, or will it be an invisible luxury? Thank you so much for learning with me today, and travel well.